let's just get your opinion, on children now being included in the Pfizer clinical trial and soon to be Moderna.
It's clearly important. We know that children can get coronavirus, they can get COVID disease, they can get this unusual complication of COVID disease that goes by its initials, MISC. They can transmit the disease to even more vulnerable people. So it's critical that we have the ability, if we really want to get to this thing that we like to call herd immunity, that we can actually immunize children. And we cannot, and shouldn't do it until children have been studied.
How would them having a specific vaccine for their age group help end the pandemic, I guess?
We know a lot about viral diseases in general. It goes back to smallpox, it includes polio, it includes a bunch of other viral diseases and some bacterial diseases. And we know what it takes to really eliminate a disease. Worldwide, for example, smallpox has been eliminated. Polio, with 2 countries, I can't remember where they are right now, has been eliminated. We could achieve that actually with measles if we could get everyone who should be vaccinated with the measles vaccine. We therefore have a pretty good basis of information to say if we can achieve a certain level of people in the population who get the vaccine for COVID against the coronavirus, that we would be able to eliminate that disease. And that's critical. We obviously don't right now have any medications that treat it particularly well. We don't really know a lot about its long-term consequences. You've heard about long haulers. We don't know about children and young adults. There's a percentage of them, for example, that get what's known as myocarditis, where they get an inflammation of their heart muscle. We don't know how many children and young adults are at risk for that. We don't know what the long-term consequences are for that. There was just today an article I looked at that demonstrates that the virus pretty easily gets into brain tissue. So we don't know what the long-term consequences of COVID in your brain is if you're, say, a 4-year-old. So these are the sorts of reasons we need to put an end to the virus as a pandemic.
If parents are hesitant, what would you say to them to maybe ease their mind a bit on having their child get a COVID-19 vaccine?
I think there are 2 pieces. One is that by the time we really have a pediatric vaccine, whether it's actually the same vaccine in the same dose or a slightly modified dose, we will know what the side effects and the long-term effects, middle-term effects, I guess I would say, of either the Pfizer-based vaccine or the Moderna-based vaccines are. Right now, there have been, between the 2, probably 80,000 people who've gotten one or the other of those vaccines, and the side effect profile is remarkably safe. A few people get aches and pains, and that's a good thing. It's like the lousy taste of cod liver oil, right? If it didn't taste lousy, we didn't think it would work. Who knows what cod liver oil is? At any rate, the issue is when we have a safe vaccine, and we have a vaccine, if it turns out to be in the real world as effective as either one of those vaccines was in the trial, then the first thing is, how do I know I'm doing my child good? The answer is because you're preventing a really bad disease. The second thing, and people would say this for measles as well, and this would be my response, is that we know that a subset of people who get measles or who get COVID, children, have horrible outcomes. There are children who have died from COVID. There are children who die from measles. Those are totally preventable deaths. And you might say to me as a parent, but it's only 1 in 800,000. And I would go, right, but I can't tell you if your child is going to be that 1 in 800,000. And you have a way to eliminate that risk and make it 0. And that's, to me, the compelling logic. We can't very well in the medical field take population statistics and apply it to an individual. If we know that 90+% of children who get COVID get over it, that's great, but we don't know who's in the 7 to 10% who don't get over it, and that's the challenge. Studies of new drugs and new vaccines, when they're appropriate for adults, are done in adults first. I'm fine with that, but then they are hardly ever done in children. And then as a pediatrician who needs to use those medications, or who needs to immunize rather, an important subset of the population and a large subset of the population, you need to know. I need to be able to look a parent in the eye and go, I'm comfortable that this is a safe vaccine and it's going to be effective. And without studies of children, That's very hard to do.
From your professional standpoint, when do you realistically think that we could be getting a vaccine for kids?
What do I believe? What do I hope? What I really hope is that we get it in time for the next academic year. So by next August, so that we can do large-scale immunization of children, even if we do it in the schools. That would be a start. Can we achieve that? Boy, I don't know. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I think we can, because this has been the fastest development and efficacy and safety testing of a vaccine in the history of human immunology and human immunization science. It's amazing to me how quickly this has happened. And I think we can do it. There are certain things, by the way, because of the speed, we don't know, but we know about as much for the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines as we know for most other vaccines when they come online. The important thing we actually don't know, that we would know if it had played out over its usual oozing out of vaccine studying and approval, is whether or not, if I get the vaccine and then I get exposed to COVID, will it hang out in my nose and can I spread it to other people? We know how infectious you are or are not in most cases if you get other vaccines. We actually don't know that yet. We'll know it by next year, but we don't know it yet for the COVID vaccines. That would be the sort of thing that would have been known if we took the usual leisurely approach to vaccine development that we didn't have the luxury of doing this time.
Between now and that potential approved vaccine for kids, whether it's before next school year or in 2022, whenever it is, what do parents need to do between now and then to keep their family safe?
It's going to be a number of challenges, and then I'll get to the meat of your question. If you think about trying to get enough vaccine out to all of the people who need the vaccine in a timely fashion, when we'll be able to get through that whole process and when we'll feel comfortable that enough even adults have been vaccinated, that's very hard to predict. It's totally dependent on the supplies and then just the logistics of getting the vaccine out and into the community and getting everybody getting everybody immunized, and then having them remember both of these, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines require 2 shots. And so getting everybody in for that second shot and keeping track of it. I mean, if you think we need 350 million people immunized, we need twice that many doses. The science and the ability to develop that is there, but it's a big challenge to get that all distributed and then get to the people who, for a bunch of reasons, don't like to deal with the healthcare world. So we have those hurdles. So that means that there will be a lot of people still at risk for the next 5 or 6 months, and we have to do what we know works for this virus. We have to wear masks, we have to wash our hands, we have to socially distance. When people have been looking now, the more recent studies about transmission of disease, people who've been doing case tracking, they seem now to largely go back to smaller groups. So those are in your home. Those are in places like restaurants where you've been there for a while. Those are bars. Those are unfortunately places of houses of worship where you are there for a long time and you may be singing or speaking loudly as part of the prayer service. We need to figure out ways to deal with those appropriately. Hand washing, social distancing, trying to avoid those small crowds. The other thing I think parents can do by way of advocacy, but also just plain information, the other thing that we know is that one of the simplest ways to deal with minimizing transmission for people who need to be indoors is to have exchange of fresh air. It's easy to say if you live in Minnesota right now, you don't want to open your windows. If you live in Las Vegas in July, you don't really want to open your windows, but we can figure out, if you're a parent, you can ask your school what steps they've taken to try to increase air exchange in the schoolrooms, in the classrooms during the course of the day. Those will probably wind up costing a little bit more money because it'll cost more to cool more or heat more. I get it, but air exchange is crucial, and older buildings probably, very old buildings probably leak, but there's an era where buildings were incredibly tight and windows didn't open. Parents need to investigate what's being done to ensure that the air is being refreshed in some reasonable way.
Is there anything else that you want to add that you think is really important to get across, maybe something I didn't ask about that you'd like to share?
Well, there's still a certain amount of COVID denial right now, and that's unfortunate. I think we've long since reached the point of recognizing that this is a very real and very lethal disease, and people need to respect the fact that it infects a lot of people. It infects a lot of people in very odd ways, and even people who are healthy enough to get over the acute illness, a percentage of those still seem to be suffering long-term symptoms. And so this is a very real disease with consequences that we don't fully know, because it's only been about a year since it was first described in the Chinese population. So we don't know a lot about the long-term consequences. I can tell you, I would rather not have COVID. Knock on wood, so far I have not. I don't want to get that disease. I don't know enough. I'd feel different if I got pneumonia. I know we can treat certain bacterial pneumonias, viral pneumonias will get better. I don't know the long-term consequences. If I got COVID and got over it, whatever that means, would I really be over it?